Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Delta Dental of New Jersey. Everyone deserves a healthy smile. Wells Fargo. Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. PSEG Foundation. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Working for a healthier, more equitable New Jersey. PSC&G. Powering Progress. The Turrell Fund, a foundation serving children. New Jersey Sharing Network. And by the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Globe. And by NorthJersey.com and Local IQ, part of the USA Today network.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The way we change presidents in this country is by voting.
A quartet is already a John. It's just the new John.
January 6th was not some sort of violent, crazy outlier.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are. There is always something to learn.
I mean, what other country sends comedians over to embedded military to make them feel better?
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
It's not all about memorizing and getting information. It's what you do with that information.
Start talking right now.
Such a good question. High five.
Hi, everyone. Steve Adubato with my colleague Jackie Tricarico, special correspondent here on One-on-One, also the executive producer of Think Tank and co-anchor and executive producer of Remember Them. She has so many titles because she does a lot. Hey, Jackie, let's tee up this interview that I did. I did an in-depth interview with Elle Reeve, who's the author of this powerful, important, compelling book called Black Pill: How I Witnessed the Darkest Corners of the Internet Come to Life, Poison Society, and Capture American Politics. You watched the interview. Elle Reeve is a special correspondent for CNN. She has won a Peabody. She's won a whole range of awards. But she was there in Charlottesville, there on January 6th, and has been trying to understand who these folks are who go to these rallies and have come to believe that they have a right to be violent and do whatever for some greater cause. Is that a good description of it?
Yeah, and a few things that I took away from that is she talked about being the most famous person in amongst the worst people and really immersing herself in these very dangerous situations where a lot of the time she's being looked at as the enemy. But she talks about using the camera.
Because she's in the media?
Right, because she's in the media, because she's with CNN. And we're talking about, white nationalists, mostly men who see her views and those views as opposing to what they believe. And she talks about the camera, though, and how she uses that as a tool, really, to keep her safe. They see that camera and they think, oh, I'm going to use this. I want to utilize this to get my message out. It doesn't matter who it's coming from. They're using it to get their message out. You talked very much in depth about those two situations that she was in, those two major events, Charlottesville and January 6th, and just her perspective from both of them and what those times were like for her as a journalist, but also her as a woman.
Yeah, she really wanted to understand, and she got in these chats, these deep into these chats where people are talking to each other, and she said there are people, and you'll check it out in the interview from Elle Reeve. She said there are people who you would never think would go down this deep into this rabbit hole of believing in conspiracy theories and get involved in events like Charlottesville and January 6th and attack the Capitol. And again, she was only just a few feet away from Heather Heyer, who was killed in that Charlottesville 2017 Unite the Right rally. She was right there next to her, and she talked in detail in the interview, Jackie, about how horrible it was to see her killed by that car that ran through the crowd. Powerful stuff. We do journalism, but she does a different kind. She's right in there.
That's right. And, she talks about, too, when you talk about online, that blurring the lines between online communities and real life communities, this whole idea of what we see and what we view online. I mean, the misinformation that we're fed. How are we fact checking? Who's fact checking? how are people getting information? All of that is some other topics that you delve into with her.
On behalf of Jackie, myself, and our entire team, Elle Reeve, Black Pill, important book. Check it out. Hi, everyone. Steve Adubato. This program is dedicated to a complex, important, and little understood topic. And our guest is the perfect person to have. She is Elle Reeve, who's the author of Black Pill, How I Witnessed the Darkest Corners of the Internet Come to Life, Poison Society, and Capture American Politics. Elle is a correspondent with CNN and has won an Emmy, a Peabody, and she does really important work. Good to see you, Elle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Black Pill, the title.
Yeah.
Comes from where?
Well, if you've heard of the red pill, the black pill is worse. That's the short answer. The red pill it comes from the Matrix, right? You take the red pill and find out the horrible reality that we're controlled by machines. Blue pill, you go back to the illusion. This has become a metaphor for adopting right-wing views, or further, that stripping yourself from the illusion that all people are created equal. From that, there's many different pills that have taken hold on the internet, but the black pill is this nihilism that society is completely broken, morally corrupt, and it's going to collapse. And so you can and should do your part to help hasten that collapse, because what comes after will be a golden age.
So we are taping this program on the 17th of October before a historically significant, important presidential election. We don't know who will win that election. We also don't know what will happen after whomever wins on election day or the days after, how the transition takes place or does not. That being said, one of the things, Elle, that caused me to want to have our producers track you down and book you, in addition to your appearances on CNN, is the fact that in your work, what I'm really struck by, and I want to start with January 6th, the video that I have seen, that millions of people have seen of you on January 6th, describe why you were there as a journalist, what you saw, and how it's connected to the powerful message of this book, please.
Well, the main reason I got there from one man, J.R. Majewski. He was a regular guy, cargo shorts, beanie, just like a regular dude who loved Trump. And I had been in touch with him from before the election. And I watched online as he slowly adopted this greater apocalyptic thinking that the election had been stolen, that there was something that had to be done. He started fundraising online to bring some 60 people to January 6th in Washington, D.C. He had an open chat, so I joined it. And I watched inside as these people talked themselves into violent ideas. It started as self-defense. They imagined Antifa was going to come and beat them up, so they needed to have self-defense weapons available to protect themselves. So it's just this increasing apocalyptic thinking, all running towards one singular event that would happen in person, where these people felt like they would all come together, meet their real friends that they met on the internet, and become part of history. It was a repeat of what I'd seen in Charlottesville, this same kind of internet fury building up towards one singular event, but it was a much bigger crowd, because instead of white nationalism, it was this pro-Trump American and their idea of patriotism.
But hold on, Elle, and we'll talk about, and you weren't that far away from Heather Heyer, who in fact was killed in 2017 in Charlottesville. And we'll talk about that, the connection, in a moment. But you've used the word apocalyptic several times.
Yeah.
Operationalize that word, please.
Well, it's like the messages they were sending each other were truly like, we were coming towards revelation, all will be revealed. Like, this is the one big moment, the storm is coming. Many people I spoke to, they would look like just regular people. Like, these were people with jobs. These were not marginalized people, talking about how there needed to be military tribunals to bring justice to the Democrats, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, members of the military that they thought hadn't done what Trump wanted.
Mike Pence?
Well, Later, yes.
Later.
Yeah.
So I want to be clear. So this apocalyptic view, on one hand, they were getting what you were following as you were getting ready to go to January 6th.
Yeah.
Was that they were going to be on the other end of violence and had to protect themselves. But now,
That's
as you're
right.
talking about it, they become the aggressors and seeking out others for retribution. Do I have that wrong?
That's not how they would tell themselves that. That's not how they would explain it to themselves. But yes, but that's why self-defense is so important, because your average person doesn't want to do violence to another human being, right? So this is how I've watched over and over again in chat rooms, that people talk themselves into violence. They give themselves permission to do violence, that their enemies are absolutely without any morals, that they'll hit old people, that they'll hurt children, you know, like they talk themselves into, they're going into battle against a great evil.
And this is on the internet. You hear this happen. You see this happening.
Yeah. So in Jan 6, I was following this in a Telegram channel. Yeah.
Disproportionately men?
No. In Charlottesville, yes. Jan 6, no. Many, many women were into this.
Okay, so help us understand this. Why do you think more of a white male, disproportionately white male thing in Charlottesville, and then January 6th, a combination of men and women? What do you think evolved in those years?
The white nationalism has been with America for a very long time, of course, but in about 10 years ago, it became very influenced by involuntary celibate culture, incels, these guys who are like political virgins. You know, they're angry at the world. They're willing to do violence for that. So it became very, very misogynistic, very, very difficult for women to be involved in white nationalism. So it is mostly an all-male movement. There were a few women in there, but they have told me how horrible it was for them. QAnon and the sort of broader kind of apocalyptic type of MAGA movement, it isn't like that, right? It's built around protecting children. That's something many, many more people can get behind, and particularly women can get behind.
Were you at risk physically of harm, both in Charlottesville or, if you will, or January 6th? Because you're there as a journalist. You're an enemy of the people, according to some folks in this movement. And you're out there asking questions, and you couldn't be seen as friendly.
No. So in Charlottesville, a lot of those white nationalist guys knew me. I was kind of like a meme to them, not really a person. How would they know you? Well, my previous reporting. I mean, once I did all this reporting, these are like internet obsessives, right? They've like researched everything I've ever done, who I've dated, where I'm from.
How would they know that? Ellie,
just like Googling, going deep, many, many pages, like page 10 of Google. And probably some other like research methods. But so they would shout things at me.
Well, okay,
about...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. They'd shout things like.
So they knew me, but the camera is kind of protective in that situation because they want to be on camera. They want people to know what they've done. They were proud of themselves. So it was scary. It was intimidating, but no one threatened me physically in the moment. In January 6th, there was a moment after they tried to, they'd broken into the Capitol. Police were pushing them back. When a protest isn't successful in that way, there's like all this built-up energy, and they'd expend it towards something, often the press, right? So this woman had a bullhorn, and she got people to circle up around us. She was shouting, "You're a traitor. You probably went to college." Got these people to circle up around us, these men. And, you know, usually if you sustain eye contact with one person, you can kind of like prevent them from doing violence to you, but it's too many people. And finally we had to leave. And as I turned and walk away, this man threw a glass bottle at me, and it shattered right at my heels, which I consider a very cowardly act because my back was turned. So I ran after him, like filming him, like, "Are you proud of yourself? Say your name. Say your name. Like, be proud of what you've done." Wouldn't do it. And all these people walking around him were like, "Don't cancel him. He's probably a family man. Don't
cancel him.
Don't cancel him."
But no consequences, and no consequence should come to him for throwing that bottle at you with your back turned?
Yeah, they were defending him.
Okay,
but the camera is powerful. The camera is very powerful.
What do you mean by that?
It's protective. You know, a lot of people in the back of their minds, they don't want to commit a felony on camera. One.
Well, a lot of
Two,
people committed a felony both in Charlottesville on camera, both in Charlottesville and January 6th.
that's true. That's true. But I'm telling you, it'll weed out some of those people. Two, and this is how I got people to talk to me, is they want to be part of history. So I would go up to them and say, like, even though I'm like the enemy, like saying I'm from CNN was like showing devil horns, right? But they would say, I would say, tell me what happened for history. And those were magic words that just would unlock. And a guy told me how he pushed through a police line and was maced. And he later pled guilty and was sentenced to prison.
To watch more One-on-One with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Ellie, let me ask you this. If the internet were not the internet, if social media were not what social media has become, do you believe these events, this movement, this poison society that you talk about in the subtitle of the book, do you think it would even be remotely possible to this degree?
No.
Because?
Well, I interviewed Jeff Scoop, who ran a neo-Nazi movement for almost 3 decades. And he started out when he was 18 with a fascination with Nazis. Really hard for him to find neo-Nazis. He found an academic book in the library. It had a reference page in the back that had all the groups and their addresses that had been interviewed. So he wrote letters to them one by one. And they had old materials. They took forever to get back to him. Like, he had to work very hard to join that movement. And now it can just wash over you on Twitter. You can try it out anonymously with no consequence.
So I want to ask you about this. Radicalized youth. There are some younger people that I know who are the children of, and grown children of very close friends of mine, who I'm sure see the world in a very different way that you do, that I do, that many others do. And I'm concerned that they've become radicalized, meaning you just cannot talk to them because they are convinced of a lot of what you described. Folks see that that media is the enemy, Democrats are the enemy, and there's a lot of vitriol and a lot of hate and a lot of anger. How the heck, A, does that happen with younger people, and B, can we even talk to them?
Yeah, I think the number one thing you can do is not stop talking to them. I've talked to de-radicalization people who say...
What is that? What's de-radicalization?
They're people who try to pull people out of conspiracy theories, extremist movements. And it's very difficult because there are inequalities in the world. There are vast gaps between the rich and the poor. There is Jeffrey Epstein, real guy. Sean Combs, real person. They did real or are accused of real bad acts. So you have to acknowledge that's real and still engage with them so they don't feel like society is just hopelessly morally bankrupt, that there is something they can do. You can now, with like white nationalists and those types, you can try to go study for study with them, but I think appealing to common sense works a lot better. And you have to talk to them like they're smart.
I apologize for stepping on that, Ellie. How much is race involved here?
Well, a lot. You don't actually have to work that hard to find elements of racism in pop culture.
Is there neo-Nazism?
Well, like that's like the planting of the seed. And the way neo-Nazis will appeal to these guys, they'll say, well, you're rational, you're logical, you're smart. Why aren't you at the top of society? Why are you always being yelled at? Why don't women like you more? Haven't you always wondered, haven't you always suspected that maybe you're smarter than, like if this is a white person, like you're smarter than people of color, smarter than Black people, right? And they'll portray this as an appeal to reason. It's actually appeal to bias. But it's very important to them to create this aesthetic that white men are the logical Spock-like creatures that should be at the top of society. And the rest of us are hysterical lunatics.
As I've watched you on the air on CNN and read your writing, and this is the book, Black Pill, I've often wondered how this has affected you, forget about as a journalist and politically, but just as a human being. Because this book also starts out with Ellie describing how and where she grew up and the neighbor that she grew up around, who apparently reminded her of some of the folks she ran into in Charlottesville on January 6th. Is that a fair description?
Oh, yeah.
Who scared the heck out of you and your family? Okay. How do you believe your work has impacted you as a human being?
Well, I've gotten really good at suppressing my feelings. So I can kind of point to two moments that it hit me very emotionally. So in Charlottesville, when Heather Heyer was killed, there's the sound of...
Tell everyone who Heather Heyer was and how she was killed with that car going through.
Heather Heyer was an anti-racist protester who was marching downtown to show, like, the city of Charlottesville does not believe in what these alt-right guys were marching for. She was marching downtown in a car, drove through the crowd, hit another car, plowed into a lot of people. Many, many people were injured, and she was killed. And I was right on the corner, just because it was so hot that day. We were just getting some shade in a doorway. And the sound of the steel hitting human bodies was absolutely horrible. And if you watch the documentary I did, you can hear, I almost start crying trying to talk about that. In that moment, that sound is replaying over and over in my mind, but I cannot remember it anymore.
Why?
Like, I don't know. Like, my mind has just put that in like a sarcophagus, just like Chernobyl, to protect the rest of me from it. Likewise, in Jan 6th, there was one moment where all this crowd, they were trying to go up the stairs into the Capitol, and you could just feel the electricity of the crowd. Like, everyone is kind of like a maniacal glee, like a rage glee. I just had never felt anything like it. And I was standing on this wall as people were climbing over trying to get in. And that's the moment that I could feel what this meant for our country.
What does it mean for those who say you are making too much of January 6th? There are good people on both sides, as Donald Trump said in Charlottesville, that there are just other points of view about this, Ellie, and yours is just one.
Sure, that's true, but I was there.
Why should it matter to the rest of us? Why should all this matter to the rest of us?
January 6th, in that moment, it's actually it's my job to have words to describe these things, and I do struggle, but it was a humiliation of our democracy in front of the world. I have watched many documentaries about the collapse of communism. I've seen that scene played out in Bucharest or in the former Yugoslavia. And to see it in America, where we present ourselves as the beacon of democracy, human rights, rule of law, it was humiliating. It was a tragedy, right? And I feel that in the moment, even as I can also feel the pull of the emotion of the crowd. Yeah, I've traveled around the world. I've been to China and the Philippines and Romania, and we actually have a lot of problems in America, but we have a good thing going, and I don't want to see it fall apart.
How worried are you for the future of our country?
I feel like we're going to make it through this, but good people have to take action. I don't think it's faded. There are a lot of bad actors out there, and there are a lot of people who will follow them.
This is not about Democrats and Republicans, is it?
No, absolutely not. I talk to many hardcore Trump supporters who think January 6th was a bad thing, and they don't blame Donald Trump for it. And that's a little bit difficult for me to square, but I do think it's important that they think January 6th was bad and that the people should not have raided the Capitol.
You're hopeful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Elle Reeve is the author of a compelling book. The documentary you mentioned, Ellie, you said we'll put up whatever information we need to put up. But what is the documentary and how do people access it?
Well, it's easy if you just search YouTube for Vice Charlottesville. It's called Charlottesville Race and Terror.
Elle Reeve is the author of Black Pill, How I Witnessed the Darkest Corners of the Internet Come to Life, Poison Society, and Capture American Politics. Elle, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much. It was really fun talking to you.
I'm Steve Adubato. That's Elle Reeve. We'll see you next time.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating 30 years in public broadcasting. Funding has been provided by Delta Dental of New Jersey, Wells Fargo, Hackensack Meridian Health, PSEG Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, PSCNG, the Turrell Fund, a foundation serving children, New Jersey Sharing Network, and by the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. Promotional support provided by New Jersey Globe and by NorthJersey.com and Local IQ.
If you register as an organ donor, you have the potential of saving up to 8 lives.
And my neighbor passed away. His eyes were actually donated, and that person now can see.
Not only can you save a life, but if something should happen to me and I'm no longer here, I know that in some small part, I'll live on in someone else.
Say yes, save lives. Say yes, save lives.
Say yes, save lives. Be an organ and tissue donor.